Welcome to the Agency Insider podcast, where we dive deep into the world of SEO and digital marketing. Today, we have a special guest, Peter Rota, a seasonal SEO consultant with over a decade of experience. Peter has worked with a range of clients from local businesses to Fortune 500 companies, helping them improve their SEO, ranking, traffic, and ultimately their bottom line. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Peter, can you start by telling us a little bit about your background and how did you get started in SEO?
It's actually one of my favorite questions because I feel like how people got into SEO is not a traditional career path. Essentially, I went to school for sports management, and in 2011, I had a sports blog. I think this is way back then, so it was basically a blogger blog, and no one uses those anymore. But essentially, I had been posting for a few months, and I kind of wanted to promote it more and get more traffic to it. And I think I did some searches for like internet marketing and kept hearing this buzzword mentioned like SEO or search engine optimization. And I was like, ooh, maybe I should try that. And had some success with that and thought maybe like I'll get an internship, and was successful in that, and then had another internship, and then it's kind of spun into a career. So now currently I do SEO full time for as a senior technical SEO manager for Hub International. They're essentially an insurance brokerage, so I help their technical SEO as well as a lot of content optimization. And then on the side, I have an agency, so I work with mostly local clients to e-commerce, and then kind of post about my experience with SEO on LinkedIn pretty frequently.
Yeah, we all are fan of that. Your
Yeah,
LinkedIn posts
appreciate
are
it.
very inspiring, right? Yes. So, what were some of the initial challenges you faced when you started your, SEO career, and how did you went about overcoming them?
Good question. I think initially it's just the amount of information was kind of overwhelming. So when you get into SEO, there's all these people that say, do it this way, do it that way. But I think how I overcame that was just a lot of just continued learning, testing, trying not to get overwhelmed, knowing that people probably have had the similar questions as you. So there's information on the internet, not that it's always accurate, but I think just actually getting around having a website you can test things on and learning on the fly. I think now people kind of jump to all these fancy objects like AI or backlinks, and it's like you want to get a website, you actually want to do the work so you can find out what am I good at, what is engaging, things working. And yeah, I definitely say it's a lot of hands-on experience and trying to like avoid a lot of the noise too. Because I mean, another thing is Google too. It's like you would expect them to be transparent, and we've seen in the leaks and some other stuff that they're not always transparent. So I think it's just kind of learning who's speaking the truth and kind of testing things out.
Right. So it's more about testing and believing rather than listening to what Google says.
Yeah, I'm not going to say they do provide pretty good information, but when it tends to come to more ranking information, they tend to be a bit discreet, but they do have good documentation on some of their technical stuff and like the beginner stuff. So I'm not going to say they're not like good. It's just sometimes you're not always going to get a straight answer. Like, why is this page not ranking? And they'll be like this stuff, and it's like not helpful.
Right. And you often mention that you have a no BS approach to SEO. So can you elaborate on what that means and how does it set you apart from the other SEO consultants?
Yeah, sure. So I think for a lot of small businesses I've worked with, SEO gets a bad rap as far as like people aren't transparent on what they're doing. They're not going to deliver results, and they're like, we'll do all this amazing stuff and proprietary processes. And like when you get down to it, SEO is three fundamental things: links, user experience, content. And it's like people complicate it saying like with our 200 checkpoint process or like all this stuff. And it's like, you need to be able to speak the language of your customers or prospects, because it's like they don't care about like backlinks and all this stuff. So it's like if you say like we're going to get you more traffic, which is ultimately going to help you get more sales and convert better, that's going to resonate more to them rather than saying like we're doing digital PR, cloud stacks, and all this stuff. So I think I just like to be transparent because the way I operate is I want to treat people how I want to be treated. And I also want to sleep well at night too. So if I'm just like making stuff up, I'm taking people's money, I'm not actually doing the work, I don't feel good as a human being. So I think it's just important to be more transparent. And I think marketing in general, it's like you obviously want to sell a product, but there's a certain part where it's like, are you messing with people's emotions and psychology versus actually being a good human being and trying to sell stuff? So I think it's a fine line.
So let's talk about the SEO landscape. The SEO landscape has changed significantly over the year. In
For
fact,
sure.
over the last couple of years. So what do you think have been the most pivotal change in that industry? Because there are more noises to the changes rather than the actual ones. So what do you think are most pivotal changes in the industry?
I think the biggest one, at least that I'm seeing right now, is the fact that like every query, Reddit or Quora is coming up. So they'll have discussion, like a little feature, but even then they'll still show up there. So it's increasingly coming harder to rank for a lot of those informational keywords. And it's like, even if that doesn't answer, you have like an AI overview basically taking that out. And I think another thing too is that like there's been a lot of sites that were doing well and tend to be more topically relevant, and then you see like a Forbes or like a Wall Street Journal or like entrepreneur.com, they put up one article about a topic and rank. So it's a lot harder for sites that don't have significant budget to basically compete. And I think also too is the introduction of these AI search engines. As you know, Search GPT is just coming out. I think is in beta now, but essentially, people I think want answers quickly, and they're tired of going to the search results and seeing like I went to this page and they don't answer my question. So it's like now people just put in like topic Reddit. So I think people are inherently just fed up. I mean, Google is saying like people are happy with the results, but it's like there's obviously some bias there. So I mean, I'd say those, and I think also just using AI to improve your workflow. So I'm using ChatGPT as far as like helping plan Google business posts and helping write my content. So I think it's just learning the skills that are going to kind of set you apart, help you stay relevant as we kind of move to the future. Because I think Google is kind of pushing people to where it's like, we have this content in the search results, like we're never going to send you people to your website. So there's like a fine middle
Right.
where it's like they want to obviously send people to websites, but at the end of the day, they're trying to make money. So there's a lot going on right now.
So how do you stay updated with these changes, and how do you ensure your strategies remain effective?
Yeah, I mean, I follow a good amount of people on LinkedIn, so that really helps. There's a lot of experts on there. Anyone from like Jake Ward to some technical people. But I think it's kind of going back to the foundations, what Google looks for. So they want essentially content that answers the question, get straight to the point, provide value that maybe some other pages aren't doing, providing that good user experience. Can people come to your website? Can they maintain? Are they able to like produce and like get results and basically get what they're looking for? Also, like making as easy technically. So, like as you know, there's a ton of like AI content now. So I think it's making as easy as possible for Google to crawl your site. So removing hindrances like canonicals, like a lot of the indexing issues we see in Search Console. So trying to minimize those when possible. And I mean, I do a lot of freelance too, so that helps me too. And I think the greatest thing you can do as an SEO is be doing something outside of your day-to-day work, because you're going to be exposed to experiences and learn new things that are going to be able to kind of translate into your day-to-day job. So I mean, even if you have an agency, it's like have some like maybe affiliate or like freelance or some other stuff that's not related, just so you can understand and get different perspectives and things like that.
Okay. I know you are strong on technical SEO, so we're gonna take a lot of technical SEO and add SEO audit questions for our audience. So let's dive into technical SEO. So what are the some of the key technical SEO practices that businesses should focus in 2024?
Ooh, good question. I'd say definitely having schema. I mean, trying to have ideally custom schema. And most of them at this point are like, oh, just WordPress plugins. So kind of just differentiating and making it as easy as possible, kind of for Google to understand your brand. I mean, I'm actually working with a client now, and they're a big brand, but they don't have any branded traffic, and they don't even appear in the knowledge panel. So it's like kind of communicating to Google who you are, corroborating that information, getting it out there so people can understand it. And I mean, it depends on the site too, but I see a lot where it's like people will set up redirects and not update internal links. I'll often see a lot where like they don't have imported links in the header and footer. Other easy wins are having an HTML sitemap. So ideally, you want content as close to the root as possible. And that's an easy hack, as well as using breadcrumbs. Another thing I've seen a lot recently too is like how URLs are accessible from both the www dot and the non www. So basically picking one preferred direction and having that be the only way people can visit it. Another huge thing now is we're seeing more and more is a lot of websites using JavaScript as frameworks. And I tend to like JavaScript is not necessarily bad, but you ideally want all the important content in the source code. I mean, I've seen websites where it's like it looks great, but you turn off the JavaScript but nothing loads. So it's like you kind of want it to make, like I mentioned, Google's job as easy as possible, and kind of just making sure like when you are linking, you're using href links and not like on click and things like that. And I think another thing too, when working with businesses, you, especially technical audits, you want to be able to prioritize by both impact and resources. So when I do reports, I try to prioritize what's going to have the highest impact, as well as be aware of the resources, because I've seen people write up audits and it's like, oh, this looks great, but it's like, how am I going to implement this? So I think it's just being super transparent and providing as much value and making sure they can understand, and also speaking their language. So ideally, hopefully they work with a developer, so someone they can hand it off to and just explain it easier.
So, I mean, of course, my next question was, what are the some of the key components of technical SEO that businesses overlook? You almost answered most of them, but no, I'm just saying. So, are there any other technical component things which you went, because you audit a lot of sites, do a lot of consulting? So, you do. What are the most common overlooked technical SEO aspects?
I'd probably say having a uniform experience on both mobile and desktop. So I've worked on sites in the past where they won't have the same amount of links on mobile and desktop, and some of the content will be missing. So Google primarily right now is crawling as a mobile crawler. So you want to make sure you have a uniform experience. I guess kind of the reverse of that is like a lot of businesses will see like an error or some errors in like Search Console or like Ahrefs or SEMrush and freak out, think it's like the end of the world, and oftentimes it's something very minuscule. So I think these tools don't do a great job. SEMrush and Ahrefs do it better because they're more comprehensive, but they don't always do a great job as explaining to people that maybe aren't familiar with SEO the importance of something. So I've had people come to me where it's like, oh, I'm getting all these issues in Search Console, and is my website being found? And it's kind of communicating to them that Google is pretty smart overall, but fixing those things would tend to help. But you kind of want to focus on what's going to have like the biggest impact too.
Right.
So I think it's also seeing an issue, not realizing you have to fix every single issue because sometimes they're like non-starters and they're not going to like
Because it
contribute.
overwhelms them looking at a long list, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's like a lot of people, they run these automatic audits and it's like, oh my God, like I have all these issues. And it's like, a lot of times they're just trying to do that to upsell their service and get you to use their product.
Right. Okay, now can you walk us through a comprehensive SEO audit checklist and what are the key elements you look for? Not the 200 with the 200 factors, but in general, what do you, when you just do? So can you walk us through some of those?
Yeah. I mean, I could actually share my screen.
Yes, please.
I need to probably update it, but essentially this is the framework I use. I like to first look at the on page. So I'm looking at the title tag and things like, is the target keyword listed as far as left as possible? Is this the right target keyword? Can we optimize it more? Is the URL using the target keyword?
Right.
But I mean, it's anything from the title tag, URL, meta description. As you know, tags and headers are super important. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the body content. I kind of look more so at this point to make sure they're not over optimized rather than under. Because I feel like at this point, Google's a lot more forgiving if you're under optimized. If you're over optimized, they're going to like hammer you. So I look at that. I look for opportunities to get more internal links to that page, as well as where I can see internal links being added to that page. I'm looking at the canonical tag. I'm saying like, is this page correctly? Should it be indexed? Should it be self-referencing? Is it a duplicate? I'm looking at the image data. Are they using all image tags? Or like, do their file names include target keywords, things like that? Looking at schema as far as like, do they have it? Is there opportunities to add more? Are things connected? Are they using any JavaScript on the page? Is it being loaded? Because sometimes like, Google is able to render JavaScript. We all know that, but it's just like we want to make it as easy as possible for the job. So I try to always make sure the important content in the sitemap, and then looking at meta robots, kind of just making sure is there an option to add like a max image preview to kind of get as much content and images in the SERP as possible because we want to take up more room. I'll run like a mobile versus desktop test from technical SEO, which I mentioned kind of just helps you make sure the experience is universal. Go through this whole thing, but I'll kind of give it a summary. So I mean, I'll look at, it's kind of anything from like XML, Search Console, I'm validating things there. I'm looking at the robots.txt, sitemaps.
So does the crawl budget also comes into feature someplace here?
Yeah, I mean, I explicitly look at the crawl budget, but I look at things like some of the page indexing issues and making sure I'm able to solve any issues as far as like, I'm trying to think what the name of them are, but it's like page index or duplicate or differential or I forgot the name of them. But essentially I try to like solve all those when possible. Sometimes it's like out of your realm of possibility, but yeah, kind of just solving all those. And I also look at crawl depth too. So are the majority of the URLs at least reachable in 4 levels? Obviously, it's a bigger website. It's going to be harder, but you ideally want them as close as possible to the root. And then I'll also look at their backlinks and their anchor text profile, kind of just seeing, are they spamming Google? Are they kind of natural? Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at those things. I do believe in EEAT at this point, but I think there's a hyper focus on certain aspects. But I mean, as Google's mentioned, and I've heard other people mention, it's mostly backlinks. But I mean, I still try to like have content that would be able to, I guess, have social proof and positioning. So it's like when was it published, when was it last updated, like who is it reviewed by, kind of linking out to your sources, putting citations at the end.
But these things will be more valid for the article or post, right? Not for the service or a commercial pages, the EE80 specifically.
Yeah, I mean those, and then also having about us page that kind of just goes into, fleshes things out a bit more. But yeah, I
Okay.
mean that's essentially
Right.
my process, and
Okay.
I'll
And
use. I really like to do like Screaming Frog.
yes.
That's where I get a lot of the stuff from. But yeah, I mean
Okay.
that's, yeah. It can be pretty long though. Like I've done audits that are like 90 pages.
How much time does it take you to do an audit like this?
I think that one took like 25 hours. But it was like pretty beastly because like I did like a content audit and then I'll look at the technical.
Okay. And so when you present it to the client, you obviously give a priority to things
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
implement, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, let me actually pull up one of the ones I was.
So then this goes into a PDF doc format, or this is the format, the sheet is the final form.
I'll just pull up the one that's like 90. Excuse me. Let me just share my screen. But yeah, going back to your question, I like to kind of at the top of the SEO audit, I present them in Word documents, but essentially I kind of give a summary, kind of highlighting how the overall audit is, areas to like improve, but essentially at the end, I'll basically break it down.
These are the priorities which
Priority
you were
of
talking.
recommendation. Yeah, so I mean, at least this site, the biggest thing was the crawl depth. So improving that, some other things here, and then going through and making those on-page updates and those different pages and things like that. And then here's like update this, and then there's more stuff, and yeah, that's essentially it. So I kind of just like to lay it all out there, and yeah, go ahead.
So this one is the 90-page one, right?
Yeah, that was the beastly one.
Right.
I've done ones that are like shorter, so it really just depends on the client and what they're looking for.
And the work scope they given, right?
Yeah, because like some they've worked with SEO companies in the past, so they may have like some foundation. So it's like sometimes there's not a significant stuff wrong with the website, but like that website particularly, they had not worked with an SEO or SEO, so it was kind of like starting from scratch. At least the SEO one goes.
So are these not the audit, but are these sheets available for your for people to? Is it a publicly available something which you share with the people?
Yeah, I mean, I've shared my audit checklist on LinkedIn before. I'm happy to like share an audit.
Okay, so for our listeners, we will have this SEO checklist Google Sheet link in the comments below. All right. That would be very exciting for people to use. All right. Now, of course, a lot of the questions which I was to ask, you helped us. For example, you showed us how to prioritize issues found during an audit. And you actually, I was looking for any specific, but can you share a specific example where addressing a technical issue significantly improved website performance? Like one of your favorite, oh, this was the issue and we solved, and this what happened result. So if you can just share or talk a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I don't have access to the client's data now, but when I started working with them, a large majority of their content, they had moved from basically a different domain, and they kind of had redirected or not really set up the redirection and migration correctly. So essentially, I went through and basically looked at the URL redirect map, set up everything correctly, made sure to actually use an indexer to index a lot of the content, and was able to like index like I think 80 to 90% of the pages. So I would say that's been one of my good experiences. I've worked with at least my current job, I think one of always forget it. But it was one of the page indexing things in Search Console, and I think it was like duplicate without user selected canonical, and I got that to drop significantly, which definitely helped Google just better crawl the website. I mean, I'd say those ones, and then also there was one where like one of the websites I work with is a single page application, so the majority of the content was not indexed, so I basically made a recommendation to make it like server side. So essentially the content is in the source code, and I was able to get more pages indexed that way too. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of stuff, but I think it's like, how does this contribute to the revenue or make the client money?
CSR or customer side rendering actually kills the SEO.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a recent thing by Versal basically saying that it doesn't matter, but I think it depends on the site and the resources. Anything at this point that's going to make Google's job easier, you want to do it. So, yeah.
So we saw the tools which you use for conducting SEO audits, but are there any tools out there which you recommend? You say, okay, so besides the one which you've been using, which like SEMrush, HRAFS, Screaming Frog, one of our favorites, but are there any other tools out there? Your recent one which you liked and would like to share?
Yeah. So, I guess I'll share my screen again. Yeah, so I use a good amount of Chrome extension. And so one of my favorite ones is the SEO Pro Extension. Yeah, so I use this. It's super good as far as looking for those on-page elements, things like that.
What is the name of this extension? SEO Minion?
The SEO Pro Extension. SEO Pro Extension. Yeah.
Okay.
And then another one I like to do is the Web Developer Extension. Mostly use this.
That's one of my favorite. Yeah, that's one of my favorite. Yeah. Right. Disable JavaScript, disable CSS, just like.
And another one I like too is actually available in that extension. It's called the it's called like the no follow. Looks like there's some mirroring going on, or maybe it's me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say those, and then I really like this redirect path tool, which will essentially tell you if a page is redirecting on it. Right. I'm also a fan of this robots exclusion checker, which kind of will tell you what robots text is that page being blocked in robots.txt. What are the other meta things showing? Right. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones. Yeah, those are the major ones.
Those are a lot of extensions you use there. But there's some new ones which I found. I will definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely put the same in the comment section below, so the listeners can go and download them.
Yeah, I mean, I joke like an SEO is only as good as their tools. Try not to be like over reliant on tools, because I think there's some times where like they're differing. So yeah, I think it's good to be able to use tools, but it's also important to use your brain and be able to make like judgments, things like that.
Right. Now, so after completing an SEO audit, what are the next steps? I mean, how do you ensure basically that the recommendations are implemented effectively? So it's just that you prioritize and be done with it, or what's the next step?
I mean, I continue to follow up with the client, and I check to make sure the changes are being done on the website, and then go through the audit, and I'll like make a check on which thing has been done just to make sure. But I mean, most of the clients, if at least these local businesses, they tend to do a bit better, because it's not like where you're in enterprise where it's like you have all these people, all these teams, and there's a resource issue. These people tend to have somewhat of a budget, and they're more able to like have the resource to actually implement the stuff. So they're usually very eager to get the work implemented, because they want to just make more money right away. Really had a ton, but I've also worked with clients where it's like I've done SEO audit and they have a team and they're like, oh, it's fine. Like, we'll reach out if we have any issues. So it really just depends on what they're most comfortable with.
Now, are there any recent advancement in technical SEO which you particularly are excited about?
Question. And not one that I can think of right now, but I think the use of AI as far as helping out with workflows. I mean, I guess one I could say was like, I'm not the greatest coder or like friendly with that stuff. So I was kind of creating a custom schema for one page and I put the code in and I was like, where is the issue here? And ChatGPT was kind of able to figure out where the issue was and I was able to fix it. But I mean, I haven't seen any things that like pop out to me like, wow, why didn't I think of that?
So are you using AI for technical SEO issues? I mean, ChatGPT or any other tool for technical SEO audit?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually started learning Python. I'm very at the very, very beginning steps, but I'm just looking to better find ways to automate things. But a lot of it's just manual work, but I'm also using like Screaming Frog, Search Console. I like to use, I mean, I guess it's somewhat technical, but I use a tool called Siteliner, which kind of will show you where the
Okay.
duplicate content on the website is and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's mostly like a bit manual process, but like I'll have check-ins that kind of will establish and keep things on.
So move out of the technical SEO, we move a little bit into the enterprise SEO. I know you have done those a lot as well. So my question in enterprise SEO is, of course, enterprise SEO presents unique challenges compared to a smaller website. Can you explain some of these challenges and how do you address them? Some of the common challenges.
I think the biggest challenge I see, at least in my work, is that it's a resources issue. So a lot of time it's like we only have a certain amount of developers, a certain amount of time, and they're like, well, what's a priority? So I think it's very important to kind of show someone what's the priority of this issue, what's going to be and why are we doing it, and making it as easy as possible for them to basically implement that. Another thing is like oftentimes it's not a ranking issue, it's the resources. So it's like it kind of hinders your ability to move fast because it's like I have to go through all of these lines where it's like I have to reach out to like my boss or I have to reach out to like the C-suite and kind of explaining them the value and particularly like why we're doing it. So it's a lot of storytelling and using data to kind of support your decision making. And another thing too is like speaking in their language. So I've done a lot of reports where like I can make it super SEO-y and they're just like, what does this mean? Like what's the importance? So it's kind of just similar. You're speaking in the ideal language of the prospect is kind of speaking in their language and essentially communicating to them why such thing is important. I think another thing too is like everything we do has to have a purpose and drive back to results. So it's like updating like every like all image tag or 404. It's like what's going to be the impact on the bottom line. So I think it's a lot of times too, it's like some stuff don't work. So at least for a while now, in my company, we've been having issues with Sitecore. So it's like, what can I do to still make progress on the website and stuff like that. So it's a lot of like what's in your control, what's out of your control. Yeah, being able to lead on your teammates too. So it's like if I have a question or something, I'm like they can help me out. So I would say those are like the biggest challenges I face. And yeah, I'd say sometimes too, a lot of people just don't understand SEO. So they're
Yeah,
like, why are we doing this? So you have to kind of explain to them the importance of the issue and get them on board. It's much easier to sell something if someone understands where you're coming from and why they're doing it rather than being like, we're doing this because it's best practice. So like, okay, well, why is it important though? So I would say those things.
okay. Now, how do you approach scaling SEO strategies for a enterprise or a large organization? I mean, For a smaller is, of course, lesser keyword, lesser traffic. But how do you approach scaling for?
I tend to focus more on the different content templates than rather than one page at a time. So it's like, here's this template on blogs, like where can we make improvements to like maybe make better title tags or better internal linking, or can we make it more like automatically? So I mean, I think recently on one of our offices section, essentially what we did, we wanted to basically update all title tags with new words. So I think we made like a macro or something where it basically updated like 1,000 pages with a new word. So I think it's like using macros to kind of like improve and speed things up. I mean, as far as scaling, I'd probably say that's the best one, and just focusing on what's going to have the most impact for each thing rather than being, I've updated these 2 pages. Like, unless those pages are getting significant amount of traffic, it's like it may not be good. So it's like, what pages are getting the most traffic, what's going to have the most significant impact, as well as like what's going to take up the most resources. So another thing we're working on, at least in one of my websites, is essentially we want to add this component where like if someone's on an insurance page for like office for home and owner's insurance, we want to have a component that also links to their auto insurance. So it's like creating a component there that kind of like scales on to like 1,000 pages. So
Kind of a top
being able to like
authority.
Yeah, topical authority and just better internal linking, because like a lot of these pages don't get linked besides like the XML and HTML sitemap. So just trying to like be better with internal linking. I think something too is like, I mean, most sites do this, but like having a related or something, obviously that's better than nothing, but I also try to like link contextually too. So I definitely say both of those things.
Now, how important do you think coordination and collaboration with other departments in an enterprise for a successful?
Oh, it's super important. I mean, it kind of makes or break the success of things. So it's like, I've run into things in the past where it's like we had this great strategy, but we're getting stonewalled by certain teams, so they just don't want to implement the work. So it's like you can have the best strategy, but if they don't want to implement the work, it's really hard. I think it's also important too to make sure everyone understands how to keep up with things. So we use a lot of things like Jira tickets to kind of communicate, or use Workfront to kind of make sure things roll along well. We also use a lot of email and chat and meetings. So yeah, I mean, communication is going to make or break something. And I think, like I mentioned, it's also getting buy-in from each party so they can be on your side, because it's, if you have people with perspectives on how things should be done, it's going to be hard to kind of like get the project executed.
Okay, now, so when it comes to large websites, how do you crawl? Is Screaming Frog able to do it, or do you have another tool which you use?
I use a few. So I use Screaming Frog, which I like a lot. I also use Sightbulb too, because I like it. Kind of goes a bit more in depth, a lot of the hints. So I like to use both of those, and I'll tend to run each of those each month. But every day I'm also checking like Search Console to make sure there's no like abrupt increases in crawl errors, or no robots.txt issues. I mean, I've also ran into a thing where I'm trying to remember, but essentially, I think basically what had one of our websites, we use Cloudflare, and they had set up these like security permissions to basically block bad bots, but they actually ended up blocking Google. So it took us like 2 weeks to unblock it, and they didn't realize it. So like I came back and like I fixed it, but like I think it's just important to be checking that stuff daily, and when possible get reminders and alerts. Yeah, you really need to be on top of this stuff, because like things will be going along well, and then it's like, oh my god, like our site's being attacked, or like things like that.
Okay. Now, what are some of the best practices for managing SEO on a large scale website?
Best practices. I think like going back to the prioritization of just making sure what you're doing is going to be actionable to the developers, why it's important, the impact, accurately communicating when it's done, what is the QA, or what does it mean by done? I think also too, when possible, working with the brand and PR teams, because that's like super important now, where it's like Google is kind of looking for brands and make sure you are getting brand traffic. So kind of sticking on top of there, looking out for, I mean, we've done in the past where like sometimes people will like mention you and then not link back to you. So it's being on top of that. I think also like focusing on things you can control, because sometimes developers are needed, but you also want to be able to make sure whatever you're doing solely is as important as possible. You're making the efforts to like actually improve things and move things forward. I think like communication too. So communicating with like your manager, like where can I help? Like what's going on with the site? Kind of being on top of things. I like to really kind of spend each morning kind of starting reading SEO news. So I'll kind of communicate things with them that might be useful for them. And just I like to like check Reddit and Ahrefs and SEMrush and all those blogs just to make sure I'm on top of things. And I think that's another thing too, is like you want to stay ahead of the curve and try to be as updated as possible and see what's going on in the SEO industry. So a lot of it's just being proactive, though I think at this part it's hard to be super proactive, but just trying to adhere to the best practices and knowing at the end of the day what's Google's end goal and trying to like make the impacts that are going to reach that goal.
Now, let's just move to a bit to a local SEO. What are some of the effective local strategies that you have implemented for your clients and you have seen has mattered?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say the probably the biggest, most impactful one is reviews. Those tend to move the needle pretty well. Well, I like for the client to basically tell the people that buy the stuff or get a review to kind of leave a target keyword in there, and when they are responding, to also kind of use a keyword within the reviews that kind of communicates to Google that rank wise, and making sure the GMB is as complete as possible. So making sure the primary category is well, if there's options to get a secondary, third category, making sure we're kind of doing competitive analysis and see what they're doing, accurately filling out all services as far as like all the things the person does, products, making sure those are all updated. I like to do GMB posts 4 times a month for clients. So kind of targeting specific service areas and things that they want to rank for. And I like to usually, for the CTA, I like to do more like the call, because I feel like if you're sending them to the website, it's just kind of like going to start them through the whole process at that point. So it's like if someone calls you, they're ready to like be in contact. They want the stuff like right now. So I tend to get better results with those. Another thing super important is like service pages and local pages. So I mean, Google says like that it's gateway pages, but the pages rank and people are visiting the content. So it's like I tend to do those. And the other thing I really like to do is I'll do press releases, but like kind of embed the GMB as well as the citation and name, address, phone number. I've had some pretty good success with those. And yeah, I mean, just regular SEO. So making sure you are getting backlinks that are sometimes locally relevant and continuing to add new content. Like I've liked to do blog content too that kind of addresses different parts of the buyer's journey. So kind of like top awareness, and then more downward the funnel where it's like, I don't know, like best carpenter near me in like Arizona, and just target that page and make that sure that's really set up well. I'm trying to think what else.
So do you also
Yeah,
build
I'd say those are
backlinks?
the
Do you also build backlinks to the
I
GM?
mean also uh I mean I've had like mixed results with that. I mean I used to, but I haven't done a ton recently, but I think it's always worth testing. But I know like back in the day, I would used to do like SAPE, like Yelp, or like a GMB. Didn't see like a ton of movement. I mean, another thing too is like, which does work well, is like CTR manipulation, but then you're kind of like getting into like the gray hat here, but I mean, it definitely works.
Right. And so,
Yeah.
okay. So, and do you try to get the NAPs indexed as well? The business listings?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one thing I've noticed is I've used a service where like if you spin the business description and keep everything else the same, they tend to index better. So I know at least with citations, a lot of time is like we'll get them created and none of them index. So I've used services where they'll basically spin like the description and those tend to get better indexed. But yeah, I mean I think with citations it's important to get like the major ones like Yelp, Yellow Pages, Merchant
Right.
Circle, Yellow.
And of course, the aggregators. Right.
Yeah, the aggregators are super important as well. So
Right.
especially like get those and they tend to feed you all the other ones.
So, how do you measure the success of a local SEO?
Yeah, I mean, I like each month, I like to set up kind of monthly reports. So I'll kind of go through the client, what we've been working on, kind of like the on page optimizations we've done, backlink we've acquired, showing where they're getting phone calls from, form submits, how traffic's trending up or down, where they're ranking in like local packs. I like to use like Local Falcon, which is pretty good. And then I also will show them interactions and things with the GMB, seeing how that's scaling up or down. But yeah, I mean, I like to keep it
So
simple, nothing like crazy. But go ahead.
now EMB going away with the call data. So, how would
Yeah, I
you deal
saw that.
with this? Well, that sucks actually. But is there anything you're gonna replace it with to track calls?
Um, yeah, I track calls, so I'm able to kind of also see like when we're getting calls on the listings and kind of
Right.
also seeing like where their clients are coming from. So yeah, it seems like every time we get good data from Google, they just like to take it away. So it's tough.
Right. Now, those were some great insights.
Thank you.
The future of SEO, of course, everybody is
Yeah.
worried about does the SEO has a future? Of course, every year the best song is SEO is dead, but let's play that one as well. So the SEO landscape, of course, we know is always evolving. What trends do you see shaping the future of SEO?
I think the biggest future is these alternative search engines. So I was mentioning earlier, search
Search
Chat
GPT.
GPT, Perplexity. I know a lot of, I think Gen Z is using TikTok and other social medias to kind of look information. So I think search will always exist in some aspect as long as people use search engines. But as we've seen, Google's pushing more and more search features into the search engine. So I think I can see definitely websites getting less visits, but the visits they do get being more impactful because if it's asking all these like higher level questions in here and I want to get to a website and find more specific information, then it's like I'll go to your website. But I think at this point with at least AI overviews, it's been fuzzy because like I know in the beta they had like 80%, but now I'm seeing they're only in like 3% of overviews. So I kind of think we're still at a time where it's like we don't know the true impact, but I see certain searches though where it's like I think some local searches where like if you search carpenter and it's like they have these like local professionals and ads and they basically push like the 4-pack or 3-pack way down in organic results. So I think it's more like Google's trying to push people more towards their properties rather than websites. And it's like it's a hard balance between we need the publishers, but then we also want to make money. So I think also for them too, it's like they realized that maybe they were on such a high horse and like Chat GPT came along and they're like, crap, like we actually have to like care now. I think another thing is like the quality. So it's like I mentioned, people just don't trust a lot of Google anymore, or they don't want to answer quickly, so they go to Reddit, which not I mean, there's certainly is some good Reddit sources, but there's also some that it's like questionable. Like, why am I getting this advice from like a 10-year-old on like some crazy topic? So I think it's important to know where you're getting the information from. I think also a lot of people too are not always trustworthy of AI. So there's going to be certain people that prefer the traditional sources and they can vet things on their own.
Now, how should business prepare for these changes, and especially with SGE? And how do you think? I mean, how do you recommend, or what all you recommend that the business should prepare with now? Search ChatGPT, so that means AI is going to be more into it. So, how do you think businesses should prepare for these?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to focus on your branding. So trying to make good relationships within the community, which will help foster good links, more mentions online, tying those back to a knowledge panel so Google knows who you are and kind of reference you. I mean, it seems like a lot of with Search GPT and some of these other things, they're focusing a lot on entities and kind of accurately describing that. I think also focusing on the fundamentals too. So it's like having the keyword phrase a few times there in the content, and likely you'll hit on some NLP words and fostering like good relationships within the community. And if you're like a
Have you
local
tested
business, for
any of,
example, what? Sorry?
have you tested any of these for
No,
the
I
SGE?
don't have access yet to Search GPT, but I've used Perplexity and I thought it was pretty cool. But I'm on the beta, so I'm hoping I'll get access. But I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think it's that I'm just not not get overwhelmed by the amount of stuff. I mean, if you're on like a WordPress website, most of them are not too bad out of the box, so you probably don't have a ton of technical issues. So it's like if you see an automated tool and you freak out like you have all this stuff wrong, like to kind of like get a second opinion and not like freak.
All right. Those will be all the questions I could think about asking you. And there were a lot of knowledge
Okay.
nuggets and yes, a lot of learnings as well. Peter, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Your insights into technical SEO, local SEO, and enterprise SEOs are invaluable. Before we wrap up, where can our listeners find you and learn more about you and your services?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Peter Rota. I also have a website at peterrotaseo.com. And I'm open to local, freelance, technical SEO, anyone that really has SEO needs at this point.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you again, Peter, for joining us. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Until next time, keep optimizing.